Welcome and thank you for listening to the Civic Space Today with Southern Defenders, a podcast that explores the status of the civic and political space in the Southern Africa region. We unpack critical issues that shape the space. My name is Madate Mloja and I am your host. As you may know, March 8 is International Women's Day, and so the month of March was dedicated to a commemoration of the strides made in the empowerment of women. Our conversation today steps beyond the celebration of the resilience of women in human rights work to reflecting on how collective care for women human rights defenders can be nurtured. We want to explore the importance of self-care and collective care in human rights work, the various forms and strategies of collective care, and the benefits of this care, including institutionalized care. We hope this discussion provides a reference point for how women human rights defenders can rejuvenate themselves, protect themselves, and be the best of themselves, not just for the movement, but for their families and communities. Our guest today is Chazile Dlamini-Magagula, who works with Swatini Action Group Against Abuse, SWAGAA, as a sign language interpreter and prevention officer. She is a gender-based violence expert. Chazile, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, and thank you for affording me this opportunity to be with you today.
We always like to start with our guests defining themselves. So who is Chazile Dlamini-Magagula?
Okay. I wasn't really expecting that, but hey, I'm a very young mother of two, and very energetic. My kids are still toddlers, and I work in the space of gender-based violence, and especially in empowerment of women in the country of Eswatini. So I have been exposed for more than 10 years now, working with the Eswatini Action Group Against Abuse.
Thank you so much. And I think, like I've already said in the intro, that, we're coming from, or we're still in the spirit of, March 2024, where we basically were looking at what efforts have been made to empower women, the progress that has been made, but also highlighting the challenges that exist. And today we're specifically looking at a challenge that is very important, not just for women, but the broader human rights community, saying, how do we begin to take care of ourselves so that we show up for the work that we do in ways that allow us to sustain the energy, but also continue to make impact while taking care of ourselves. So I want us to start maybe from the basics and maybe have you describe the specific types of burnouts, the stress or secondary trauma that women human rights defenders experience in their different spaces.
Thank you so much. I think that's very important. Actually, that's I think you're bringing up a very important question in looking at the burnouts and the stresses that are normally experienced by young women, or especially women, in the human rights space. I think I'd start with professional burnout, where we find that women need to balance their careers with caregivers' responsibilities, where now, like I've mentioned in my introduction, I'm a mom and I have a career as well. So, actually balancing up that in terms of ensuring that my kids are well taken care of, and the work that I do, I'm actually excelling and shining on that. And I think also what we need to look into is the issue of emotional burnout as well, where we talk about the societal norms that are expected, especially from women as caregivers now. And that puts, whereby we find that women put other people first, ensuring that they're nurturing and ensuring that they put their needs or other people's needs before their own. So I think those are the types of stresses and burnouts that I would probably highlight, or maybe I can actually highlight also one important element that in the past 3 years, I've been working with this institution and engaging with people, especially women living with disabilities, where I've noticed intersectional stresses amongst women living with disabilities. By this, I mean that women with disabilities are being discriminated based on their gender and disability, and this usually manifests in various forms, where we notice that the issue of unequal access to employment opportunities, women living with disabilities not being able to access number of services that they should be accessing. So maybe those are the burnouts and traumas that women, maybe those are the highlights that I can just bring up to say these are the traumas that women go through.
Thank you so much. I actually love this because as part of the conversation as we go on, we are going to dwell a lot on, with those challenges in mind, how can we take care of ourselves, particularly as individuals, but also how that can then generate collective care where we begin to take care of each other. And one thing that you said that was very powerful for me is just this idea of, women having to balance between their professional work as well as their carer duties as mothers, and just highlighting the fact that you're doing this well. I love to hear that. We love to hear it. And I think as part of the conversation, other moms that are potentially listening that do the same work that you do will be able to get a few tips on how best they can also do that. And I think you raised a very important issue around persons with disabilities because, like you said, it's more than just women human rights defenders. It's also the fact that it's a woman human rights defender that also has a disability, but also has other expectations that are placed on them by virtue of them being a woman. So I'm very excited to see how we're going to have this conversation and how we can respond to all of these challenges. So I wanted to also just ask you, still within this conversation, about the needs and the challenges that are faced, to say, how does human rights work specifically impact defenders' mental, emotional, and physical well-being?
Human rights work can have a very significant impact due to the nature of the work and the challenges that women actually face within their working environment. We face experience and witness quite a number of abuse in firsthand, especially in the fields that I'm currently working in, where we find that leads to the issue of vicarious trauma. This can also result into issues of post-depression, post-traumatic depression, and also what also compounds the challenges that defenders face is the issue of operating in resource-constrained environments, which also with also limited access to mental health services and support. I believe that working in an environment with resource constraint as well as limited access to mental health is how human rights work impact their mental health as well as their physique.
Thank you so much for this. Since, like, I think one of the things that you did very well was just to highlight the specific challenges within the line of work that you're doing. So what personal self-care practices have you found most helpful in managing the emotional weight of your work?
Honestly, the work that we do is emotionally taxing, and it's important to actually prioritize the issue of self-care. So some of the practices that we as an institution or I have personally found useful in the work that I do is I ensure to take exercises, listen to music, just the simple things that will not actually cost me a lot of within the finance space, because also we're living in an era or a space where we're not financially stable. So I think people should move from the culture of thinking that self-care or collective care is focused in finances and resource mobilization. So I think one of the helpful things that I have practically or I have personally worked into is exercising, listening to music, meeting up with friends for drinks, just pampering yourself, visiting the salon, getting your nails done, and actually seeking support from your colleagues. That is one of the most helpful things that one can actually practice.
I like the the examples you gave, because I think it's like it's so important that in the midst of all the amazing work that we're doing as, giants in our communities that are speaking truth to power, pushing back on the abuse of women, these little things that we're doing as a way of care are also opportunities to ground ourselves in the fact that we're human beings. We're just women in communities. We have friends. We talk about things that not necessarily work. So I like the examples that you gave, because I think they bring a sort of normalcy to women human rights defenders that also doesn't take them away from ordinary people, because sometimes there's that huge gap that's created where this particular person, because they're human rights defender, you can't approach them, or they are separated from people. So I think part of care is just remembering to find ways in which you can tap into the human being and the ordinary life of a human being. And my second question is, how have you built the concept of collective care into your activist community? What does this look like in practice?
my current employer, Eswatini Action Group Against Abuse, we ensure that for all our staff members and for all people that interact or work with SWAGAA directly, we try to incorporate the practice to support our employees, especially on their well-being. So we provide gift vouchers. We conduct debriefs for all employees to actually relieve them from the stresses that they work on each and every day. Sometimes they also do body massages. However, I just encourage people not to wait for the next person to ensure that they are taken care of. This is just an important component that if you feel you have a burnout, you seek professional help. So in our community, we ensure that we speak to people you'd find that a number of people do conduct self-care activities. It's just that they're not informed or they're not aware that all those activities that they are actually venturing into are means of collective or self-care.
Thank you so much. I like the ending, like the part where you speak about people not saying. I think it's actually, in a way, it's a good thing in the sense of it's normalizing self-care as something so ordinary that people don't see it as something extraordinary. And I think that's kind of where it would be great to see more women human rights defenders kind of existing, where you're taking care of yourself as a daily act of, taking care of yourself. And it has nothing to do with, I have to intentionally do A, B, C, D to make sure I'm okay, but kind of just having a lifestyle that allows you to be okay. And I love the examples that you gave of what you do. I think it's very exciting. I'm just thinking that I might just want to come and work with you guys for all this care that you're giving. But as you're looking at the examples that you gave of yourself, when you look at other institutions and organizations involved in human rights work, how do you envision them institutionalizing care, especially when you're looking at offering mental health support, flexible work arrangements, things like that, and not just for organizations that work with women, with human rights defenders, but also organizations that collaborate with those women-focused organizations and organizations that fund those organizations? How can all these different people find ways of making care part of institutions?
I think the most important things that other organizations can actually look into is creating an environment where their employees feel valued and they're supported as well as empowered to fulfill their mission effectively within the work environment or the working space. I also think institutions may offer regular trainings on the issue of self-care on its own and the issue of stress management and resilience and building of capacity and techniques that each person or each employee can actually venture into to look at the issue of self-care. I also think I have noticed within the workspace that I work in, we have provided or offered regular debrief sessions. That culture is being incorporated into our work, and I think maybe other institutions need to look into that. Just provide regular debriefing sessions, especially if a project is ending, and people will be able to just reflect and share experiences as well as their emotions, and are able to receive support from their colleagues. Because also it's important that you receive enough support from your colleagues and in that particular institution.
And how can we change the expectation of this constant sacrifice and martyrdom often associated with human rights work? Because I know that, like, I think I already said earlier that there's this, by virtue of the work that you do or women do in human rights, there's an elevation of those women as, people that cannot necessarily be accessed. So they're kind of put aside on their own. They're saving people, they're rescuing people. It's martyrs in the community that are constantly giving of themselves. So how do we begin to change this expectation, not just from people, but also from women themselves? Because I think it just comes with the work where you begin to see yourself that way and you begin to see the work requiring you to give more than, you're able to give. So how do you see us balancing that?
Thank you again for that important question. I think this requires an approach that is actually aimed at both individuals and mindset shift within the community and as well as within the community, society, and as well as the organization. So we need to actually promote the issue and prioritize the issue of self-care, and not currently, I don't know, maybe in the African context or in Swaziland, currently the concept of self-care is seen as waste of money, resources, or you're just it is actually deemed as being selfish. But rather, I think it's necessary that people are capacitated and equipped long term to actually understand that and normalize the issue of budgeting for collective and self-care support in the future.
I find it very interesting when people say, it's a waste of money. I think it relates to what you said earlier, where people always associate self-care with spending money or having to use resources. And so when they look at people taking care of themselves, it's more like, why are you using money for this? It feels like you shouldn't be using money for this. You need to use money for serious things. But this is the serious thing that someone needs to be doing in order to energize themselves, in order to sustain the energy that they can give to people. Because when you deplete yourself, it means that you will not be able to give of yourself. And by extension, you will not be able to support the people that you need to support. So I always find it very interesting. And I hope that for the women that are listening, or the people that are listening, it's just reminding ourselves as well to say, when you're sitting down at home and thinking about, what you need to spend your time on, what you need to spend your resources on, I think just as women, ensuring that we do not tell ourselves, oh, I'm wasting 2 hours of my day or a full day by choosing to do this. But you need to look at it as, this is also work, because I'm taking care of the body that does the work. So I hope this kind of comes strong to the people that are listening. And then I know that you've given examples of how you've experienced or also provided collective care within the communities that you serve. So maybe in talking about the power of community building, can you share examples of how collective care has helped you or your colleagues overcome specific challenges and setbacks in your advocacy work?
I think I can actually suggest or recommend 3 things, especially to in the spirit of collective care, because collectively as a group, there are quite a number of activities that you can actually be conducted for a group. So maybe people should consider, or organizations should consider, team building exercises, debriefs where people just sit and reflect, share their experiences, and they're actually able to speak out so that they're getting the necessary help, especially amongst their colleagues, as well as the issue of celebrating of achievements, whether big or small. This gives a sense of motivation, especially amongst the people that have really put in the work, especially in the workspace.
I like the concept of celebrating achievements very much. I think it's not just I think it's for the individual as well to help you realize just how much work you're doing, because you get used to the work. I think example of the work that you do, because you do this every day and you've been doing this for a while, it can feel too much like, this is what I'm expected to do, this is what I do, this is what I love doing. But you never stop to say, this is actually impactful work. I've done tremendous work. So I think this culture within workspaces, within communities, to celebrate achievements is very important, because it also provides space for energy. Because when you're losing the energy to do certain things, you're like, but I've done similar things. This is the kind of impact that it has had. If I'm feeling stuck, how can I draw from the lessons of the things I've achieved? So I think it's a very beautiful way of taking care of ourselves within communities. And how can women defenders build support networks and safe spaces to prioritize each other's well-being?
I think this might involve creating an environment that ensures mutual support, collaborations, and respect, especially at individual and organizational level. At this level, I think we need to value diversity as well as inclusion, by ensuring that we create the safe space where individuals actually feel comfortable sharing their experiences and their challenges, as well as vulnerabilities that they have, especially while they're still conducting the work.
So there's something I need to also just add into this conversation. You know how like when people step back from the work, it's looked at as you're giving up and like you're giving up on the struggle, right? What is your personal opinion or reflection around the need to stop, you know? Because I think when you mentioned earlier that in the line of work that you do, there's this exposure, first-hand abuse to trauma that has an impact on you as a person, will by extension affect all of the other people that interact with you. So what is your perception around, people that might be feeling like, I really wanna stop because this is as much as I can take, and this is as much as I can give. So how can, like, reflecting on how the person can conceptualize it for themselves and see it as a good decision. And then also from the side of people that are looking at them and receiving their decision to step back. So what can almost like stopping to start, what can it look like for different women, for different people in human rights work?
Personally, I think, like you've rightfully said, I think people must just know when to stop and reflect on whatever situation and whatever they have taken within their work space and their work environment. So I personally feel that's the greatest thing, that on its own is self-care, in which you have just noticed or realized that you have actually taken a lot, so you need to just step back, not minding what other people are going to be thinking or feeling around you, but that on its own shows that you're able to you understand yourself, you understand your body, you understand when you have taken enough, especially in the work that we do as an institution. I'd honestly advise people to just take a break, breathe when necessary, take leave days when you have to, take some time, take vacations, take some time away from the work that you do every day. If it means switching off your phone, being away from social media, because that is actually where you get the influx of cases coming through. So I think that pausing, breathing, and actually stopping, backing off when it's necessary is just one of the greatest way that a person can actually do to ensure that they're taking care of themselves.
I like that, and I think I would like us to speak a little bit more about social media in a bit. But I wanted to say, because I think earlier you mentioned how, persons with disability have they have additional experiences that other people may not necessarily experience. The question around it is, what kind of collective care can we make available if like different people, not just within the PWD community? How can we support persons with disability? That's the first thing. But also, I think one of the things I'm very pressed about is the need for meaningful inclusion, because it's one thing to get a sign language interpreter on a Zoom session, or to get, the things that people do that are meant to be inclusion, but that may not necessarily translate to the meaningful participation or contribution of persons with disability in the work and in the spaces that we create. So how can we meaningfully provide that inclusion as a safe space as well for them to come in, like you said, and share their experiences and get support from the community?
I think the greatest, or one of what we as human rights organization or defenders can actually try when we speak to issues of inclusion is to raise enough awareness about disability and the diverse needs of people living with disabilities. So if the whole world is aware that we do have this, we live with such groups, and enough awareness is raised, and the issue of inclusivity is important as well. But I think if I understood well, your question was around the activities or initiatives that people living with disabilities can actually venture into to ensure that they're taking care of themselves. Is that right?
Yes, that's part of the question, yes.
Okay, so in our earlier conversation, we spoke about self-care practices that are helpful in managing especially emotional stress and traumas, or actually burnouts rather. So I in my response, I think I made mention of activities that I think an abled person as well as a person living with disability can actually do, like the issue of maybe going out with friends. And if you're being supported as a person that has a disability and you're being supported by the people around you or the group that you mingle with, I think it's important that you actually try to involve the people around you, especially if you have a disability, and are able to just conduct activities around or within the means or the scope of your disability. I don't know if that makes sense.
100%. That makes sense. And I think this is the other thing that I hope, like, the listeners that we have, especially today's episode, I hope you get to share with us some of the things that you're doing in your different spaces, because I think we learn from each other, like just sitting here and listening to you and how your organization does it. I've learned a lot, right? And I think if more people begin to share, so if any of the human rights defenders, whether it's women, just sharing some of the practices that you have that have been working for you that other people can learn from. And this also extends to persons with disability, to say, sharing the ways that you're taking care of yourself, that you are taking care of each other within your communities, but also how you're taken care of in institutions, in communities, and how you're taking care of others. In what ways can women human rights defenders or human rights defenders in general use social media platforms as a place of learning and potentially caring for themselves? On the other hand, how can they use social media in ways that can be helpful, even in instances where they are feeling harmed by the space? Because I think one of the conversations that's constant in reflections about women in the online space is finding ways in which women are not pushed away from social media because it's a harmful space, because it takes them away from a platform where they could be influencing, or a platform that is meant to be useful for women, right? So it's more like, how can we take care of ourselves without necessarily stepping back? Because there are women that step back and never come back into the space. And so it means that women don't have the physical space for the kind of work that they're doing or the influence they had, but now they also don't have the online space where they're influencing others positively. So how can they navigate the space? So stepping back, but not in ways that deny them the opportunity to use that space in a meaningful way.
I think generally as women, we need to learn ways in which we can be able to support each other. By supporting each other, I mean, even in the media spaces or social media spaces rather. So because sometimes you find that something is being written about a woman, and the first people that are going to comment or actually mock the other women are actually women at the same time. So I think while you're ensuring that you're able to take care of yourself within the media or social media space, I think it's very important that as women, we are just capacitated on being able to actually try and uplift each other's or boost each other's confidence, especially in the media space.
Thank you so much, Chazile, for that. What would you say to someone who wants to support women, human rights defenders, but doesn't know where to start, especially when it comes to championing care?
I'd probably suggest 2 steps, or rather 2 things that a person can actually do to ensure that they are taking care, or they are they try or want to support, or for a person that would want to support rather. Especially in the African context, especially in Eswatini in particular, we live in a patriarchal society. So I think it's important to just take time to actually know and understand the specific issues that women face daily, including the issue of human rights, including the issue of human rights, and as well as the risks of the work that we try to do every day, and its impact as well. So just make sure that a person can just make sure that they get or gather enough information on how they can, just by understanding the concept and what human rights defenders are trying to push and their agenda. There's quite a lot of things that have been written and reported on as well, just to get an insight of how we as women feel and how we wish other issues would be handled or tackled within the workspace. And I think also we need to have to continuously reflect on, people will need to have a continuous reflection on their privileges and based on their privileges, as well as biases and assumptions, so that they're able to be responsible, especially to women. Just the willingness to adapt all the approaches that different institutions are coming up with on the needs and priorities of women. I think those are the two things that I actually suggest a person can do.
I love that. Thank you so much. And how can ordinary people advocate for greater recognition and resources dedicated to the well-being of activists? And I want to say, because I think the word ordinary people also is very interesting in itself, because human rights defenders are actually ordinary people in our communities. But I think this is more in reference to everyday people that don't see their work as, human rights advocacy or defense, people that are just going about their everyday lives. How can those people advocate for greater recognition and resources dedicated to the well-being of activists?
I honestly think would have to try a number of strategies. One being ensuring and are deliberate in raising awareness about the concept of self-care and actually promoting it, promoting the culture of self-care, especially in our content. We also need to try and advocate for policy change at various levels. In our content in Eswatini, we have local governance and as well as the national level of it. So I believe reaching out to the grassroots level and actually speaking about the concept of self-care and the importance of ensuring that a person is able to take care of themselves. When we started our conversation, I did mention that self-care doesn't actually need a person to have a lot of finances, or it doesn't mean that person is just being selfish and wants to just waste money anyhow. I would rather think another thing that we can actually try to do is mobilize and mobilize and try to support people, especially through my workshops and seminars. We ensure that people are informed and well equipped, capacitated on how they can actually ensure that they take care of themselves.
Thank you so much, Chazile. I've really loved this conversation. I think for me, it's been a reminder of the need to take care of myself, but also just learning how to contribute to caring for other women and for other people within human rights work. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your insights. Do you have any closing remarks?
Thank you so much again for awarding women such a beautiful platform to actually learn on the importance and ensuring that you bring up such spaces where women are able to just share, or where women are just able to just share the the things or activities that they think they can actually do to ensure that they're able to take care of themselves. Thank you.
It is our pleasure, really. Thank you so much for your time. And a special thank you to all of our listeners. Would love to hear your feedback and thoughts on today's episode. Leave us a comment on the platform you're using to listen to this episode, or take us on a post on social media. Remember to share this podcast and follow Southern Defenders on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You can visit our website, www.southerndefenders.africa, to get a broader sense of the work of Southern Defenders. This is the Civic Space Today, a program of the Southern Defenders. I am Mandata Loja, your host for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next time. Together, we defend.